So today we are joined by Valeria Paz. She is a PhD student, a PhD candidate at Florida International University. She is in the final stretch of her PhD work, and she's joining us today from Miami, Florida. And today she's going to share with us her work of using passive acoustic monitoring to investigate bottlenose dolphin habitat use in the Florida Everglades. So reminder to submit your questions to the chat. Go ahead and submit them either to DCP, Kathleen, or to everyone so that Valeria can focus on her talk. She might not see the chat posed to her. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Valeria.
Thank you, Cal and Kathleen. Oh, thank you so much. Let's see if all the technology cooperates today. Thank you so much for tuning in. And all right, can everybody see my slides? All good?
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you. And I'm going to disappear for the moment, and I will pop back in when we have questions.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Cal and the Dolphin Communication Project for the invitation, and everyone for tuning in today. My name is Valeria Paz, as it was stated, and actually my major advisor is Dr. Mike Heithaus. He was a speaker in the deep dive seminar just a couple of weeks ago, and he spoke about dolphin and shark interactions. And today we'll be talking more about dolphin movement. So today we're shifting gears, and I want to emphasize the importance of understanding movement. As we have experienced this past year, the unfortunate spread of COVID-19, it has made it abundantly clear the importance of understanding human movement. Since this virus was highly contagious, understanding the contact-to-contact information was vital for its containment. So understanding movement is vital and important, and is also important in the animal world. It allows us to pinpoint problem areas, and it helps us to shape conservation efforts. It allows us to understand which environmental factors are important. So today I'm taking you to the Florida coastal Everglades, which is located in the southern tip of Florida. This system is generally oligotrophic, which means it's just nutrient limited, mainly by phosphorus. And it is part of a long-term ecological research site since the 1980s. Researchers have been studying how changes in water flow or hydrology, climate change, human activities affect this ecosystem and the organisms that live here. The Florida coastal Everglades is comprised of different kinds of habitats, from mangrove-lined channels to inland bays and tree islands to marine waters, and it is considered a wilderness area. It is highly managed in terms of water flow, meaning the hydrology of the coastal Everglades has been altered, and this was due to building of canals and levees to redirect water east and west of the historical water flow. So here in this slide, you can see on the left-hand side where it says historical water flow, you see that sheath water flow from Lake Okeechobee all the way down to the southern Everglades. But the current water flow, now you see water is flowing east and west. The Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan is a plan to restore water flow back into the Everglades. And this is important because it would affect the ecosystem flora and fauna. So that water needs to go down to the Everglades because we've been having a lot of problems due to red tide, algal flow, not enough water in the system. And we need to understand how this restoration will affect this whole Everglades system, and as well as the added pressures of sea level rise and climate change. Today, we will focus in the Shark River estuary, which is just a part of the Florida coastal Everglades. this river runs from, it has fresh inputs from the marsh, and it flows down to the Gulf of Mexico. So they have a large variability of seasonal variability due to changes in rain, and as well as changes in salinity due to the freshwater influence. And this mangrove lined channels actually also have a seasonal variability of prey. So during the dry season, prey from the marsh are refuging in the headwaters of the river, and this provides more prey for other predators to use. So in my lab, we mainly study three different kinds of predators that co-occur in this river: the freshwater American alligator, the juvenile bull shark, and the bottlenose dolphin. And we're interested in understanding the movement and the habitat use and trophic interactions. So habitat use is important because it's vital to know where these animals are getting their food from, where they're resting or using it for mating, and it directly ties and affects to conservation. While trophic interactions would tell us more about where they are in the food chain and what they're eating and what's important for their livelihood. In this talk today, I'll be focused in the habitat use. So how we determine the movement patterns of these like large predators, we use this technology called acoustic telemetry. By using acoustic telemetry, there is two different components. So for acoustic telemetry, we pretty much only use this technology on sharks and gators and other large predatory fish. So the two components of the acoustic telemetry is a tag that emits sound and that is picked up by a receiver, then it's placed underwater. So anytime a tagged individual swims past a receiver, it would be logged. Those tags could be inserted in the body cavity, like you see on the right. There's a shark where the tag is being inserted surgically. Or it could be externally, like in the case of alligators, where they're tagged in the scutes and they're attached outside the body cavity. And these tend to be on for about like 12 months. So we have a really long-term data set, and we know a lot about the movements of sharks and alligators in this river. So we know that from gators, they have different movement tactics. So we have some alligators that tend to stay within the same areas in the marsh. Then we have a group of the population that is staying in the bay, and we have a group population that is going from the bay all the way down to the marine waters. And since they are not tolerant to marine waters, they only make short trips just to feed and come back. So we have these three different movement tactics within alligators. And this work was mainly by Adam Rosenblatt. It was a past colleague in the White House lab. And for juvenile bull sharks, which was work by Phil Matich and Bradley Strickland, they saw that there was changes in ontogenetically. So pretty much as the juvenile bull sharks grow, they change what parts of the river they're using. The mouth of the river closer to the marine side, they have a higher chance of encountering larger sharks, which would be unfortunate for the juvenile sharks because of predation. So they tend to stay, the juvenile sharks tend to stay upstream where the larger sharks can get to them. And as they grow, they tend to move out of the estuary. So we know a bunch about different movement tactics
Valeria,
about alligators.
we have
sorry.
two kind of linked questions, and apologies if you're about to get to this. So we had one question about if the alligators are territorial, and then as you were then mentioning the juvenile bull sharks, was it that a larger bull shark would prey upon that smaller bull shark, or will a gator prey on a small bull shark?
Oh, okay. Well, alligators do tend to be territorial, and it's mostly during breeding season. I may be incorrect since it's not part of my research, but I think that's what it is. And for the juvenile bull sharks, actually, they're preyed over different kinds of different larger sharks in the mouth of the river. So not only do we have bull sharks in Florida, we also have lemon sharks, different kinds of sharks that juvenile bull sharks could be vulnerable to. So the smaller sharks tend to be upriver until they're big enough to fend for themselves, and then they go get the better prey out in marine waters.
But an alligator won't try and eat them.
There's been cases that alligators have eaten bull sharks. I think there's a famous picture from, I think it's Georgia, that there is actually, it was a juvenile bull shark on the mouth of an alligator. So there's been interactions with alligators and juvenile bull sharks.
Thank you.
Yeah. So although we know a lot about alligators and what bull sharks are doing in the system, then the question came about of what about the dolphins? What are they doing? And well, since dolphins tend to be a lot larger and a lot more difficult to study, we decided to look at other methods that, and we can't just grab and tag them. So we looked at other methods and what we could use in order to understand more about their movement tactics. So bottlenose dolphins are large, so about 250 to 300 kilos, and they eat a lot. So they consume around 20 to 50 pounds of fish or different kinds of prey per day. And they're actually very relatively abundant. Past research in this river, actually since 2010, was mainly done by boat-based surveys. So pretty much we went out on a boat and spotted ran tracks with the GPS. And every time we spotted a dolphin, we wrote it down and we took pictures of their fins to pinpoint individuals. And then we can see where individuals have been and are going. So by using their dorsal fin, and they have kind of like fingerprints where you can understand the different individuals, and their fingerprints tend to not change over time. So we use these fin pictures to understand where they are and where they have been. But using boat-based surveys is extremely expensive, and also it's very limited to daylight hours and environmental conditions. And as you see here on the right, our survey area is extremely large. So we have a lot of nooks and crannies, and we have a lot of rivers, and it was just very hard for us to get a clear picture of the movement patterns just using photo identification. So when I came aboard for my dissertation, we had to figure out another way to complement what we already knew. So I want you to please close your eyes and listen to this.
I'm not sure your audio came through.
No.
If you go to the top of your screen where there are like some choices, I can't see it exactly because you're sharing the screen. I think there's an option to share computer audio.
Okay.
When you put your mouse, or at least on my computer, like when I put my mouse toward the top, when I'm sharing the screen, there are some choices, and then there's like a couple of dots to the right.
It's view options.
I don't think I can do it from here. Or I can make dolphin sounds for everyone.
Perfect. Well,
We
actually,
can imagine
it
it.
was, just imagine some sounds. But actually, I was gonna ask what kind of sounds you thought it was, and it
Oh,
was actually a beluga whale.
oh,
So marine mammals and large whales can communicate over distances using low frequencies, while dolphins and porpoises use higher frequencies for vocalization and clicks. So pretty much what this means is that they use echolocation to navigate and hunt underwater. This means that they emit a sound of waves and detect and interpret the echoes that bounce back from other creatures or objects in the water around them, which allows them to build a picture of the surroundings and pretty much seen underwater using sounds. So dolphins can hunt using this echolocation, which means they can find water no matter how murky the water is. And in the case of the Everglades, this is very useful because the water is extremely murky. So we use that to our advantage, and we determined that the most efficient way to understand dolphin movement in this river was to deploy CPOTs, which are passive acoustic monitors, which are just simply a microphone underwater that records specific sounds. And since the Everglades water is often very murky, dolphins tend to vocalize often. Here's a picture of how the monitor looks like. So the passive acoustic receivers, the CPOT, select which sounds to record, meaning that the volume of the data is much lower. So some of the advantage of this is that we can continuously survey large areas over long periods of time, and we're not limited by daylight hours like in boat surveys. And overall, after an initial investment, the costs are minimized. We simply need the batteries and an SD card, and we can collect large amounts of data. Simply how this works is that we bring back the SD cards to the lab, and they're analyzed by running programs that uses a digital waveform characterization, which select for dolphin sounds. And it logs time, center frequency, sound pressure, duration, bandwidth of each click. So pretty much they are just determining sound characteristics that help us determine what made that sound. And this provides a measure of certainty. So the CPOT software, which is what we use to analyze this data, we used what it's called DPMs, which are minutes that the CPOT recordings contain at least one echolocation click, indicating the presence of a single dolphin. So these clicks that we identified, we only use clicks that were high and medium certainty to avoid false positives. So dolphins emit echolocation clicks that are short broadband pulses with center frequencies between 65 to 100 kilohertz. Generally, there's two types of clicks: the regular orientation clicks that are simply to navigate, and feeding buzzes, which is just a much faster intervals, and they use that for feeding. So we can tell from the recordings whether they have feeding events or they were just cruising through. We deployed these CPOTs in the Shark River estuary, and we deployed 4 passive acoustic receivers in May of 2017. And just after 4 months of deploying this, a big surprise came, which was Hurricane Irma. So Hurricane Irma caused drastic changes to the ecosystem. If you see the purple rectangle, that indicates where our research site was, and that's the track of where Irma passed through. So there was major changes to the ecosystem. I was dead scared that all my monitors had been flown away, and I was extremely nervous of the kind of information we would get, or if we would get any information, or if we had completely just lost our investment. But thankfully, our CPODs where they were deployed, so the way that we had deployed them, they were really secure and withstood the forces of the hurricane. So it was detected that there was a 10-foot surge just at the mouth of the river. So there was a lot of different kinds of environmental conditions that changed quickly and drastically. Just to give you an overlook, sorry, go
Valeria,
ahead.
when this question came in a couple of minutes ago, but
Yeah.
when before the 10-foot surge, what water depth were they deployed at? And then maybe you'll get to this. Now I'm curious what it sounded like during a hurricane. But the original question was, how do ambient noise, how does that affect the recordings, if at all? Or does your software just filter that out?
Yes. Okay, so for the ambient noise question, so ambient noise is also recorded, or a measure of ambient noise. So ambient noise does affect depending on what kind of ambient noise it is. So for example, if you have snapping shrimp, which the frequency in which the snapping shrimp like produce noise, it can mask dolphin clicks. But thankfully, in our system, we don't really have the shrimp problem. And actually, just the way that the channels are made, so they're steep channels, and I guess just because of the bottom type, actually sound travels fairly like better than we thought previously. So and we saw that actually just with the acoustic transmitters that we had a range of like half a mile, and that was at 60 kilohertz. So it's about, I think, 10 to 15 feet. The like it's pretty even along the river, and these were deployed at like 2 to 3 meters, depending on where it was. Sometimes a little bit less than that, depending, because there's a big tidal change as well. But it seemed to work. Obviously, there's a chance that detections really vary depending on where it is, because ambient noise changes with different parameters. That's something that we're also taking into account, because we know the environmental conditions each of these monitors were in, because we have monitors at each of these stations for environmental conditions.
Thank you.
I think those are the two questions.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. So I wanted to just give you an outlook of how the hurricane affected the system. So if you look at these pictures, we can see how Hurricane Irma impacted the mangroves with heavy defoliation. And also you can see how months after Irma hit, you can still see structural damage to the mangroves and changes in water quality. So this extreme event actually provided a unique opportunity to understand how these sudden changes affect the environment and how it may impact dolphins and the ecosystem overall. Here in this graph, we have the environmental conditions from July to January on the x-axis, and temperature, salinity, and dissolved oxygen on the right. So the red line indicates when the Hurricane Irma made landfall. And in the temperature, we see a rapid decrease in temperature and an increase in salinity and dissolved oxygen. This is indicative of the 10-foot surge brought in by the storm. Following, we see a decrease, particularly in dissolved oxygen, and that was like almost a month, and then it starts to recover. But then in that gap, actually there was an equipment failure, so we don't really know what happened then. So after these are just the environmental conditions, and here are the actual detections. So here we have graphs placed on the Shark River according to the location of the monitors. From left to right, it's freshwater to marine gradient, which is the Gulf. And the red line indicates the hurricane landfall. We can notice an increase of detections after the hurricane, particularly in the upstream monitors. And this was mainly due for increased feeding activity, and actually just a paper that came out a few days ago of also dolphin passive acoustics in offshore waters. I believe they also saw increase in feeding activity after the hurricane. So I'm kind of excited to see how it compares to this instance. And since we're comparing detections from week to week, I wanted to make sure that this was a hurricane effect and not just a seasonal change, because also within these months is the change from wet season to dry season. And so here we have the preliminary view of the 4 stations over time. From the year 2017, which was the hurricane year, to 2019. And by observing long-term patterns, we can separate the differences between normal seasonal patterns and hurricane effects. When we investigated the differences between years within a nova, a hurricane effect became apparent, with daily detections from 2017 being significantly different from the other years, and for the stations Downriver, Upper Bay, and Harney. Unfortunately, since we only have time to overview preliminary results, and I'm still working on the analysis since it's a very large, huge amount of data, and we're still assessing how to incorporate models and integrated the environmental factors, I am still trying to figure out how dolphins move in the system, but we're closer to finding that answer. And this is important because now I hope that this research will fill this important gap of information now that we know how other predators move in this oligotrophic river. We may have a better outlook on how dolphins are moving. So overall, the large variability in habitat use, even within the river, is obvious. And there's advantages of using passive acoustic long-term monitoring because we can see the seasonal patterns and then pick out the hurricane effects. Without the long-term monitoring, we would not be able to determine whether the hurricane effects were hurricane or seasonal effects. And this is just the first step in understanding how dolphin movement can influence nutrient flow in a nutrient poor area. So with that, I want to thank you for tuning in, and I'll take any additional questions if you have them.
Thank you so much. While we filter through our questions, everyone can make note there if you want to stay in touch, and we will have Valeria tagged in our social media posts as well. We can always track her down. And a reminder to folks that as we wait, I just have to learn to be patient. It takes a second. We will post this recording on our website. So that's going to be under the education tab. You can look for webinars and you'll see the recording. And then towards the top is always the schedule for the next 2 or 3 webinars. And then we also have those posted to our YouTube channel, which is Cleverly Dolphin Communication Project. And so you can view it there. You can subscribe, of course. And then if you're looking for more dolphin info, be sure to tune into our podcast, The Dolphin Pod. We've got lots of episodes available on the DCP website or wherever you get your podcasts. Our next program is a dolphin lesson. So that's geared towards younger audiences, but we think the young at heart enjoy them too. That is going to be on being a zookeeper next Tuesday, also at 1 o'clock Eastern. And then there'll be a little bit of a break over the US Thanksgiving holiday. So our next deep dive is Thursday, December 10th, and that's going to discuss contaminants and marine mammals. So another good one to tune into. And then of course, DCP is a nonprofit, so we would be remiss if we didn't remind our viewers and listeners how they can support us. Adopt a Dolphins, make a great holiday present, or if you know someone who just needs a pick-me-up, or a t-shirt, or become a member, all of that good stuff. You can find all that stuff on our website. And of course, stay in touch either by email or social media. So now we will get to the rest of those questions, which I had one come in that was asking, when you mentioned the fear of losing your investment with the storm, and I will insert a tangent. DCP has occasionally used a passive acoustic monitor at our Bimini field site, and the first time of like being in the boat with equipment and then coming home without it was unnerving. Like, I knew it was how it was supposed to go, but I wasn't expecting that. Like, it messed with my head to leave it in the ocean unattended. No one's watching it. It's just down there. So what does that type of equipment cost? I know the sort of maintenance of it, batteries and SD cards, is relatively affordable, but what does one of those monitors cost?
Around, I would say $3,000 each monitor.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually, prices really differ depending on the kind of equipment that you're using. There's some equipment that it's more intricate, so you would get a lot more information. So not only just digitized form of the sounds, but also the sounds. So you would get sound recordings. So that could be useful, but it all depends on the question. So different kinds of equipment depending on the scientific question that you want to ask.
And this one, you may have said, I missed it, and this person did too. Each deployment that you did, how long was the monitor out for before you would retrieve it?
So the monitors were out for 2 years consecutively. There was only I think a few monitors that either there was a malfunction and they were out for like a month or so. But usually we try to just have them out of the water and try to clean them up as fast as possible and deploy it right back. So the only time that they were out of the water was for maintenance, and we went at the beginning we were going every month, and then we went to 2 months, 3 months, depending on where the monitors were, because the detections, if you are detecting a lot more, the batteries drain a lot faster. So we had to maintain them at different rates. But pretty much they were out for 2 years, and we minimized the time that we're out of the water. So I have a lot of data, which is great.
Wow.
So I'm really excited. Yeah.
So as Cal mentioned, with the deployments we've done to Bimini, because we are in 6 to 10 meters of water depth, we actually swam the unit down, placed it, and could look over the side of the boat and see it and know that it was there. And obviously you couldn't do that in the rivers, but how did you, and I would think and assume that you didn't actually swim them into place, given that there were gators and bull sharks in the rivers. But did you have a buoy at the surface so you knew, where it was and you could easily pull it up and drop it down, or?
That would have been great. No.
Oh, no.
Since it's park regulation, since it's inside a national park, they have really strict regulations, which is also, feasible. The people that do go and visit those very remote areas want to see the place as natural as possible. So that's why we were not able to deploy buoys at the surface, but we had subsurface buoys. So we still had them down at least a couple of feet down. So if it was a clear sunny day, we can see them, but most of the time you couldn't see it. So it was a lot. It was definitely challenging, and I had a lot of really great volunteers that braved the waters with me. So I was swimming down and getting those monitors. I think the worst time was actually after the hurricane. It was a little dangerous, and we were all prepared, just having all the first aid stuff in the boat. But I really wanted to get the monitors and make sure that they were there. So I braved in along with a few brave volunteers and searched for the monitors underwater. But since there was such a large storm, there was a lot of debris around. So it was definitely a little dangerous, but most of the time it was fine. I mean, I definitely became very brave, not thinking about it and just going for it. And the kind of data that we got was amazing. And the Everglades is such an amazing system. Gators tend to be afraid once you're like in the water. I think as long as you don't surprise them, they'll tend to swim away. So I have seen them in the water while I'm in the water, swim away, thankfully.
I would
And
leave that to you.
Yep. Okay, then. I like the clear water abimini for deployment.
oh, definitely. I would, yeah. There was only a few times where those days that are just perfect, that you see the subsurface buoy, if it's not like completely biofouled, and we grabbed it with the hook and we were able to pull it up without going in the water. Those were the good days.
Wow.
But you know, with everything, sacrificing for science.
Yep.
That's right. We've all
Thanks
done
for your
it.
memoirs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Very cool.
Fantastic. You mentioned a paper, but it sounded like it was someone else's research about dolphin habitat offshore around before and after the hurricane.
Oh yeah, yeah. So actually, it was just published like November 6th, so just a little bit ago, and they were using also acoustics, and they found that they were feeding after the hurricane a lot. So I was like, that is the same thing that happened in my site. I'm working on getting that paper submitted as well, but it was nice to see it in a different kind of habitat, that they still had similar behavioral responses.
Excellent. And we will look that up, and we will post that, at least the citation, if we can't do the whole article, for our followers. And then the same thing as your papers come out, make sure to stay in touch, and we'll be happy to share those with our supporters as well.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you for the talk.
Yes,
thank you to everyone who's listening. And we wish you the best of luck with the rest of your research.
Thank you guys so much for having me.